Hi book friends, it's Kim, the lifelong reader. Welcome back. Today I want to share with you a book haul. This will be my first book haul, and I've been avoiding book hauls because quite honestly, if you knew how many books make their way into my house, I would be embarrassed. But for you, dear readers, I am swallowing my pride and I am sharing with you the books that trickle their way into my home. So let's talk about these books. Since I recently finished Tinkers by Paul Harding, I have been thinking about the beautiful, evocative nature writing that was included in that novel. And it's also made me think about the wonderful reading experience I had last year reading Northwoods by Daniel Mason. And I have been wanting to read more nature writing. So in my recent book purchases, I have picked up just a few books that are nature writing. This first one here is called Rain, and it is by novelist and nature writer Melissa Harrison. And Melissa is from the UK. And in this book, she details for us 4 different walks in English weather. And of course, we all know that English weather can be rainy. I would love to go to Scotland. I did go to Ireland, and I remember thinking it was very cloudy when we were there, even though it was absolutely beautiful, a magnificent trip. But rain is a part of the life there. And these 4 stories are going to talk to us about how the rain affects the environment. So let me tell you, whenever rain falls, our countryside changes. Fields, farms, hills, and hedgerows appear altered. The wildlife behaves differently, and over time, the terrain itself is transformed. In Rain, Melissa explores our relationship with the weather as she follows the course of 4 rain showers in 4 seasons. She will be in Wicken Fen, Shropshire, the Derwent Valley, and then Dartmoor. Blending these expeditions with reading, research, memory, and imagination, she reveals how rain is not just an essential element of the world around us, but a key part of our identity too. And it's that last paragraph that sold me on this book because, you know, I read the same way. It sounds like she's taking to her walks, reading, research, memory, and imagination. I try to bring all of that to the books that I read. So if there's a word that I don't know, if there's a concept that I'm not sure of, if there's an area that I'm not clear on, I will do a little bit of research so I can improve that reading experience for myself. And it sounds like she's going to be bringing that to these stories. And there are some rudimentary illustrations in here. I'm assuming this is stuff that she sees along her way. But the book is less than 100 pages. She is an award-winning writer. So I'm really excited. I think this will be a great quick read for me this fall. The second book I bought that is nature writing themed is A Fox and I, An Uncommon Friendship by Catherine Raven. And Catherine is a former national parks guide at several of the larger national parks, including Yellowstone here in the United States. And she has her doctorate in biology from Montana State University. And the premise of this story is that one day when she is at her remote cottage in Montana, a fox shows up and she decides to start reading to him. And before long, they are taking walks together and playing games together, and they develop a friendship. And this is someone who was living an isolated life. So this fox brings a lot of depth to her everyday living. And this story sounds really fascinating to me. I've not been really close to foxes before, but the couple times I've caught glimpses of them, I've thought they were beautiful creatures. And the closest experience that I've had to something like this is a previous house that I lived at. I had a swing in my garden, and in the evenings I would sit out there and read and be very still. And before you know it, you're hearing the beating of hummingbird wings, and they are hovering in front of you because they're just not quite sure what you are. That is a magical experience if you've ever had that happen. So that's probably the closest I've ever gotten to reading to a fox, is sort of reading to a hummingbird, but not really realizing I was reading to a hummingbird. So looking forward to that experience. And I already have a bookmark in here because when I got the book, I was delighted to see that the author provided a glossary here in the back of the book. So if you guys have watched my videos, you know, like I said, I will be looking up words, so I can just turn to the back of this book and probably find almost anything I need to look up while I'm reading this. Now, this book is 286 pages, and to me, when I was looking at it, I thought that would be a very quick read, but it does have quite a bit of heft for a 286-page book. And I believe it's because the font is very small and the margins, while they're not crazy, they are a little bit on the small side. And I'm thinking maybe it weighs so much because the ink, all of the ink on the page makes it a little bit heavier. I hope that doesn't sound terribly naive to say. But that's the only thing I can think of. So I believe this will probably take me a little bit longer to finish it than I thought when I was purchasing it, but that's okay. I'm sure it will be a good book, so I look forward to letting you know how that goes. The next book I have here is Cider House Rules by John Irving. I have some Irving in my collection, but I did need to purchase this one to be able to do the read along that's happening here on BookTube. There are a couple booktubers, and I won't be able to name them all. I'm sorry, but I know Kim in the Middle of the Book March and Book Pat with Chat are two of the hosts of that read along, and we are reading a certain amount of chapters or pages per week and then chatting about the book on Voxer. If any of you viewing this video now are on that read along, I look forward to interacting with you on Voxer. Very excited. This will be my first buddy read. So taking the training wheels off here and reading with the group, and I'm super duper excited about it. So this book, as it opens, is with Dr. Larch, and he runs an orphanage in a small town in Maine. And there are also two nurses that help him run that orphanage. And Dr. Larch seems like an interesting character so far. He's very passionate about several things, including these orphans. So he seems like a really good guy, but of course, like everyone, we have our flaws. So his flaws, I'm sure, will be revealed as I go throughout the story. But I do know the blurb says that he is an ether addict. So it seems like we're going to learn a little bit of those types of things too. So looking forward to this. I have only read, 12 pages so far. What I have read, I do like. I've read Irving before. I read his novel, A Widow for 1 Year. And I found it completely different than anything I had read before, and I did enjoy the reading experience. So looking forward to reading this. It seems a lot wittier than A Widow for 1 Year was. Maybe I'm just not remembering that one correctly, but this one definitely seems to have a little bit more wit. And of course, you probably already know, but this was also adapted into a film, which I have not seen. So I will be able to look that up when I'm done with this book and watch that as well, which is always something fun to do as a reader. The next book I have to talk to you about is Big Two-Hearted River, which is a short story by Ernest Hemingway. And I picked that up in this Centennial edition, which is celebrating the fact that this story was originally released 100 years ago. And this was a cover buy for me. I was drawn to the beautiful engraved artwork that adorns the cover of this book in this fly fishing scene. I thought it was marvelous. And the book was not cheap. It was less than $20, slightly more than $15. And I knew it was a short story, so I usually struggle with spending that much money on a short story, but this was such a beautiful edition. I went ahead and purchased it. So the premise of Big Two-Hearted River is that we are following Hemingway's namesake protagonist, Nick Adams, I believe. And Nick goes into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan here in the United States and goes on a solo camping and fly fishing trip. So that is what the short story is basically. That's the basic premise. This edition has a foreword by a nature writer named John Maclean, and John Maclean is the son of Norman Maclean, and Norman wrote this short story collection called A River Runs Through It, which was published in 1976. So I had this on my shelves for a number of years. I found it at a thrift store, but I have never opened it up and read any of the stories in it. But I read just a tiny little bit of the foreword to see who John Maclean was and discovered that he was Norman's son. And in that part of the foreword, he talks to us about how he and his father really loved Big Two-Hearted River. It was an important story to them. They are both writers, so they sat down together and pored over this story. They broke down Hemingway's writing. They looked at the metaphors. They looked at the themes in this story, and I found that a fascinating side tale. So I went to my shelves and found this, and I do plan on, once I finish Big Two-Hearted River and the complete foreword in the Centennial Edition, I will go to this and read at least A River Runs Through It. It is one of 3 short stories in here. It is 105 pages long, and it actually was also adapted into a film, and I'm struggling to remember if it was a Brad Pitt movie or if it was a Robert Redford movie. But that's another fun thing that I can do after I'm done reading this book, is look up that movie. So I'm excited about that too. And the other thing that I thought was really cool, again, in the foreword of Big Two-Hearted River, just the first few pages, John Maclean tells us that this was his father's first published book. He published it in 1976 at the age of 73, which I thought was fascinating. I thought that was really cool that his first published works came out at the age of 73. So looking forward to that. And this book has some beautiful engraved artwork throughout. So you can see how marvelous those are in this edition. It just brings so much to the story. And if you've ever done any looking into relief printing or lino cut or wood engravings, that is something that I have been really drawn to for the last 10 years. I've tried in the last 10 years to get a little more creative, bring a little bit more art into my life. And I have tried my hand at some of this, and I can tell you I'm nowhere near as good as this artist. But I am certainly a lover of his work and enjoy having this edition of this book. And then of course on the back, it has a very cool picture of Ernest Hemingway from Paris in 1924. And if you know me, you know I love all things antique and vintage, and this is definitely a vintage picture, and really, really loving to see Hemingway so young and, you know, right at the start of his career. So excellent, excellent book to pick up. Okay, the next thing I picked up is What the Twilight Says, which is a series of essays by the poet and playwright Derek Walcott. And Derek Walcott is a Caribbean writer. He was born in St. Lucia in the West Indies. And Derek became familiarized to me through his poem called Love After Love. And I discovered that poem in 2011 after I had gone through a breakup. And I'd like to read that to you now, just so you get an idea of his writing. Love after love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. So to me, that poem is about coming away from a relationship and remembering who you are and paying attention to yourself and giving yourself the time and attention that you are due, that you have perhaps not been affording yourself because you've been enmeshed in this relationship. And once I learned a little bit more about Mr. Walcott, I'm not sure if my interpretation of that poem is correct. I need to do more research because one of the things that I discovered when I was looking at this series of essays and when I decided to purchase it and read some of the works in here is that the title essay, What the Twilight Says, talks about the colonization of the West Indies. And one of the things that Walcott is quoted as saying is that our bodies moved in one language and we were thinking in a different language. And I'm sure I'm misquoting him there, but it's a similar theme to that. And I found that profound and heartbreaking. And it's not my lived experience, of course, but I am so interested in hearing more about that. And I know some of the ways that Walcott dealt with that. One of the plays he wrote, one of the main characters is someone who absorbs everything that the colonizer tells him, and he knows a lot, but he doesn't really understand any of it. And again, that's how he dealt with some of that. But I'm really looking forward to diving into these essays and sharing some of the knowledge that I gain from them. He seems like a fascinating character. When I found that poem, and I thought, oh, I need to look up this author and see who this is. I had no idea that it was going to be from such an accomplished person. I thought it was just kind of a sweet little love poem. And of course, as often occurs when you peel back the surface on a writer, you discover so much more than you ever thought you would find. So looking forward to getting into this and sharing a little bit more of his writing with you folks. And the last thing I'll share with you in this book haul is this interesting book I picked up, which is a fictional novel written by the American folk artist Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie was born here in the US in 1912. So in his 20s, we were deep in the Depression and Dust Bowl era, and that is a lot of what this novel is about. And Woody Guthrie was interested in the plight of the working man and union labor and socialist movements and things like that going on back in the 30s. And I have not listened to a lot of Woody Guthrie's music. I listened to Bob Dylan, and I know Bob was influenced by Woody Guthrie, and that is about as close to Woody Guthrie as I got. But when I saw this, I decided I would like to read this. So the premise of this book is we have a husband and wife that are living in Texas, I believe. Yes, living in Texas. And they are living in a rickety old farm shack, and they're having trouble surviving in the Dust Bowl era. And the spouse finds a 5-cent government pamphlet that tells you how to build an adobe dwelling. And he decides he would like to do that because it is Dust Bowl proof and it will protect his family. He's very in tune with the land that he lives on, but unfortunately he doesn't own that land, and that is where the trouble begins. So this book is going to deal with that era. If you've read Steinbeck, you know that is the era that Steinbeck generally writes in, and I've read a couple different novels that take place back in that, and I'm excited to pick this up and see what this reads like. This was completely an impulse buy, just really curious as to what kind of novel that Woody Guthrie would write. This book also has a foreword by Johnny Depp, which again, I will skip right over that so the story doesn't get ruined for me, but I will go back to that when I have the story finished. So looking forward to that. This was published, it says it was finished in 1947, but it wasn't published until 2013. So I'm sure published posthumously, perhaps by his family. So again, looking forward to picking that up. And that's it, folks. That's my first book haul to share with you, just some of the books that have trickled into my house over the last couple weeks. I look forward to bringing you more reads in the future. And I'm wondering, have you read any of these books? Do any of these titles entice you? Do you think maybe there'll be things that you'll be picking up, or will you be following along to see what type of reads they turn out? What have you bought recently that you'd like to tell me about? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Until I see you again, I wish you nothing but happy reading.